Well, great. Well, we just hit 41 participants, so why don't we get started? It looks like it's just about 2 o'clock, and I don't want to take up too much of folks' time. So let me start by saying thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, to our folks who are going to give a presentation, and all of you who are here to listen in and have submitted questions. Thank you. I'm Delegate Brooke Learman. I represent District 46 along with my teammates, Senator Bill Ferguson, Delegate Robin Lewis, and Delegate Luke Clippinger. District 46 is in Baltimore City, but of course the arts community knows no boundaries. And so I'm so pleased to be working with our panelists today to be presenting this information to folks from around the state and of course all over the city. So I just we're gonna start into the substance in a very short amount of time, but I just wanna give a little bit of introduction. So, I decided to host these webinars each week to really help all of you and others and anyone who wants to have information keep up to date on the rapidly changing state and city and regional response to COVID-19. This is our third webinar. Our first one was on benefits and applying for benefits and tax information. Our second one was with Congressman Sarbanes, and both of those are available on YouTube on my Brooke Learman for Delegate YouTube page. And you can find them also YouTube links at brookelearman.com. I've long believed as a delegate that my job is more than just about passing bills in Annapolis. It's about connecting people to the resources they need, and these webinars and this today is exactly that. So where do we find ourselves? So today we find ourselves with over 8,900 confirmed cases here in Maryland. We have lost 262 Marylanders to COVID, and nearly 1,900 are in the hospital today. We know Governor Hogan has issued a stay-at-home directive. He's closed non-essential businesses, expanded telehealth services, and he's also prohibited residential, commercial, and industrial evictions. So why are we doing this arts webinar today? Well, there is a huge health crisis, but this is also an economic crisis, and the physical and financial well-being of artists and the arts industry is extremely important to me personally, but also it's extremely important to the entire state of Maryland and to our ability to recover, in addition to being important to all of you. Our arts sector, as you all know, is so robust, the envy of many states. Your arts organizations contribute over $1.5 billion to the local and state economy. You engage millions and millions of art visitors a year, you provide tens of millions towards local and state tax revenues. And, I would just say our arts organizations make life, they keep hope alive, I think, in our state and create safe, engaging, and welcoming spaces throughout our community. Just add so much value and vibrancy to life in Maryland. So I really want to do all I can to ensure that a post-COVID-19 Maryland continues to be a leader in the nation for arts and culture, and that we can ensure that this generation and the next generation of Marylanders is afforded the same incredible access to the arts that we have today. And that means making sure that we're supporting our artists, supporting our creatives, and supporting our organizations in this really difficult time. So thank you for being here with us today. I am so pleased to have 4 amazing panelists today to talk to you about how we are responding, coping, and rebounding in this time of crisis. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Nicholas, Adam, Maggie, and Donna. Nicholas is the Executive Director of the Maryland Citizens for the Arts, which is a statewide arts advocacy and education organization that provides a voice to all arts in Maryland. He will be discussing the current fiscal impact on Maryland arts-based economy, and he'll talk about potential next steps in advocacy. He's also going to explain some new engagements with the Maryland State Arts Council.
Again, my name is Nicholas Cohen. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Citizens for the Arts. Those who don't know the organization, we represent the state as it comes to championing public investment for the arts. So really working with our legislators to make sure that the arts in Maryland are funded, are heard, and really in good times and bad times. I think we have enjoyed incredible arts in the state of Maryland for many years. And it's, I think in times like this where we're all coming together and figuring out what the current situation is going to be, but also the future. Maryland Citizens is here to support all of you, to listen and to advocate constantly. And I appreciate Brooke, Delegate Learman for for calling these leaders together. And again, I'm here just to kind of give you all some updates and really, pass the microphone over to other incredible leaders in the arts as well, as you'll hear from. So what I'll kind of go through on my slide, as you can see, I'll talk about economic data, some current state resources that are out there. And I believe Ken Shkrshesh from the State Arts Council is joining the call. Actually, let him speak to some incredible work that they're doing. And then I'll kind of end with some advocacy points, some things that you can all think about and how we're all going to move forward and through this together. So the first thing I'll mention is, so as part of economic data, our organization, we are at the state level, but we're also working with some national partners. The main one being Americans for the Arts, and they've actually helped create an online survey to kind of capture the national economic impact that's been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the shutdown. And basically it's capturing things like lost income and attendance of arts organizations and artists. So to give you a sense of what that looks like right now, nationally speaking, the impact has been over across 11,000 participants in the survey. It's about $4.5 billion in economic impact due to this pandemic. And from this same survey, we can look at it from a Maryland specific piece. And so we had almost 400 survey responses to this dashboard, and we had the economic impact in Maryland is 3.7 million and counting. This is actually data from last week, and it keeps getting updated. So one thing I will do after I'm speaking on the chat, I'm going to include the link to this dashboard, and I encourage, if you're an artist or an arts organization, you haven't filled this out yet, I encourage you to fill it out. And also the data it's aggregate, so if you've already filled it out as an organization or an artist, you can keep filling it out and it will update your information. Make sure you pick the name of your organization needs to be the same, is the only piece, but hopefully that shouldn't be a problem. But it's a great resource, and the reason why I say it's such a great resource is we've actually been using this data that we're collecting with Americans for the Arts in real time. The first real win with this data, using this data, was at the federal level. We engaged our senators and congresspersons at the federal level to champion arts relief funding being found in the most recent stimulus bill, known as the CARES Act. And this actually was found in, lawmakers put in specific funds for the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Humanities, and a few other arts-related pieces and humanities-related pieces. And so the NEA specific to arts in the state got 75 million in the CREATES Act. And again, that was a lot from this dashboard showing current impact. I think this was when it started about 3 weeks ago. The numbers were huge even then, and lawmakers at the federal level saw that, and they saw the importance of putting in monies to stimulus acts going forward. So the CARES Act was one piece, and we're in continual conversations with our Maryland representatives to champion, to say, when there is another stimulus bill, please continue to think about how you're going to support the arts. Another piece of this was the original SBA loan for small businesses. There was conversation about not including nonprofits. And again, a lot of us advocates were saying, that wasn't just the arts, but that was a whole army of nonprofit advocates saying you have to include nonprofits in this. And they have been. I know to many of you, that's been a bit of a slow process to get that money out. That is another conversation, obviously, but it has been included. So advocacy is important at the federal level. Now, thinking of the state, of course, our role is to make sure the Maryland State Arts Council gets funded each and every year, as they are a state organization, a state entity out of the Department of Commerce in Maryland. Myself, I'm in very close contact, as is the staff of MCA, with the State Arts Council, whether it's sharing the data I just said from Maryland specific economic impact, the $3.7 million in loss, and just other items as we're hearing it from the federal level, or best practices, and just basically communicating to the State Arts Council, how we can advocate for them to help the community. And I will say, they've been very responsive, especially for a government agency to move in the speed that they have been. Going forward, we are working with the State Arts Council to look at different tools, whether it's using the same survey or if we need to create a different survey that's Maryland-based, maybe a little separate from Americans for the Arts. As we're finding, maybe with data collection, there's always holes that you find that you're missing. So we're committed to, if needed, developing a new survey in the coming months to really inform our advocacy. So MCA's advocacy, what does that look like when we talk to state lawmakers as far as what potential help we need from Maryland government. So the next now I want to go into really quick is current state resources. And as I mentioned, the Maryland State Arts Council, from a government agency perspective, has been moving swiftly, updating whether it's emergency grants, relaxation of some of their requirements to make sure that money is getting the hands of arts organizations and artists. And Ken, would you mind, can I call on you if I saw your name come up, I think you're on. Could you say a few pieces about, I know there's been some updates, some like sort of breaking news on the emergency grants and your requirements for that?
Yep, sure, Nicholas, thanks. And Delegate Learman, thanks very much for hosting this today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Sorry about the technical issues.
We're all used to it already, right? Very nimble. So
Yeah.
just a few quick updates from the Arts Council. So as Nicholas said, we've approved emergency grant program applications for arts organizations and independent artists to distribute a limited amount from the State Arts Council funding, as well as what we're receiving from the National Endowment for the Arts. All emergency grant applications are now being asked to demonstrate their anticipated funding for federal, state grants and loans. We had originally asked for evidence of funding or evidence of ineligibility, and because of specifically the holdups at the federal level, we realized that those requirements were preventing us from getting funds to artists and arts organizations as well. So just about 30 minutes ago, that restriction was lifted by the Arts Council. So as Nicholas said, we're trying to move quickly. For the rest of our grant programs, almost all matching requirements have been suspended to allow programming to continue without the need for private contributions at this time. Funding timelines are being extended by request, and any restrictive language around allowable expenses has been reduced to grants funds may be used for any arts-related expense. In addition, all outstanding arts and education grant agreements for teaching artists were submitted for payment in full with no additional activity expected of teaching artists. County arts development grants, including the grant to the Baltimore Office of Promotion in the Arts, we've removed the match requirement. Funds are now being allowed to be used for emergency relief to artists and arts organizations in the jurisdiction. And we're encouraging all arts agencies to allow any previously funded project grants to be used for any arts-related expenses. So once again, removing restrictions for spending. Similarly to what Delegate Learman is doing, we have several virtual communities that we are building. One starts tomorrow morning. We're calling it Coffee with Ken. And you can find all of this information on msac.org. So anyone, we're just holding the space to listen to people. We know that artists and arts organizations need to be heard, and we're there for that. We're also offering creative conversations by discipline. So for instance, all visual artists can gather at the same time and do peer-to-peer sharing and share any ideas or just have conversation. And then finally, we're launching a professional development series with all kinds of topics that will hopefully aid and assist arts and arts organizations across the state. Our marketing and communications team is moving to push all kinds of information out. And we're noticing that a guiding thread that has come to light for us is our need to focus everyone on the vision for the resurgence of the arts in Maryland. so that we're not just sitting in this difficult time, but actually imagining what's possible when this has passed and how it can be even better. And through that lens, and in partnership with Nicholas, as well as Arts Education in Maryland Schools and the Maryland State Department of Education, we've re-envisioned this year's Maryland Arts Summit to be completely virtual. So we're quite excited about all of that work and hope that it helps in any way. Again, all of this information is at msac.org. I also want to recognize, as well as Maggie and Adam on the call, Donna's particular leadership at BOPA. We're very grateful, Donna, for everything you've done there, and we look forward to continuing to support in any way we can. So that's the update from the State Arts Council. Thanks, Nicholas, and thanks, Delegate Learman again.
Thank you. I'm so glad you could join. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And again, we are excited that the State Arts Council is moving so fast. And again, the fact they're able to be nimble and change some of their granting procedures and getting emergency funding out is crucial. So, and I did want to echo, Ken was mentioning on their website, they are collecting all these listening sessions they're hosting. They have some creative conversations coming up this week, which can all be found on their website, which you have on the slide. I encourage all of you to join those conversations. And one of the biggest reasons, beyond just obviously importantly connecting with your arts community, is the database that we're working with the State Arts Council eventually to create. We're going to use a lot of that advocacy as far as what stories are you all telling, and beyond just the economic impact. I mean, the dollars are important for us to have that's devastating, but it's really in this certain time, all of you coming together, what you're able to do, and the struggles. I mean, and it's going to be a difficult conversation and story to tell, but it's something that we need to do. So I definitely appreciate the State Arts Council hosting a lot of these conversations and really helping to build this advocacy message. So to also mention, we have been producing a updated daily resource page for COVID-19 on our website, which at the end of the slide deck, you'll see everyone's kind of information and how to get onto our websites if you haven't. But we make sure to kind of give state resources for the arts, and then as much as we can, localized pieces as well. So I encourage you to visit our website because we update it every day, and we're trying to also give resources around what arts organizations are doing and artists are doing in the virtual realm, and a lot of it's great, from large organizations to small, really providing resources and just moving a lot of their arts economy online. That's also, there are ways to support that you'll hear too. So another great place to go. And so I do want to end with just quickly around advocacy. If you haven't connected with MCA, please visit us on our website, sign up for our emails so you can kind of get onto what we're trying to do to build an advocacy voice. And as I mentioned, the economic data that we're collecting, that I will also provide the link to for Americans for the Arts. Please upload your economic impact numbers and document your stories. There will be plenty of avenues to tell that. We will collect them. We will use that to talk to lawmakers, to make our case, to make sure the funding for the arts doesn't go backwards. But even in times of crises, we see growth. So what I'll end with, and this is a great example, we're all here because of a state lawmaker, Delegate Learman, connecting constituents. And my thing is also continue to stay in contact, whether or not Delegate Learman represents you is really beside the point. She represents a district, but really passes legislation that impacts all of us Marylanders, irregardless of where we live or who we are. So definitely keep in contact with your state lawmakers, and I mean your district representatives too. Make sure they know, it could be a simple email to updating them on what you're doing, the struggles you're having, and also your local leadership, wherever you might live, whether it be Baltimore City or outside of those jurisdictions. Keep them in the know. And I didn't put this, but federal is important as well. Really, every level needs to hear from you, the good and the bad, because it just reaffirms our need and our case going forward. So again, thank you. And I know now we have Adam.
Yeah, and I'd reiterate everything you said, Nick, especially to make sure that folks stay connected with lawmakers, good or bad. We need to hear from you now and in the future. So thank you. Adam, I'm sorry I got cut off when I was reading your illustrious biography, but I'll turn it over to you. Take it away.
Sure, Delegate Learman, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody else on the call. My name is Adam Hollofcenter. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland's Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, and it's our mission to provide access to pro bono legal services and educational opportunities for all types of Maryland artists and creatives, right? So whether you're an opera singer or a pastry chef or a juggler or a visual artist, anything that has, you've imbued your creativity and your passion in, we are here to help serve you. Now, as I've said on many previous calls, the bad news is, unfortunately, given the way that art and commerce intertwine, you are likely a small business, more likely than not. Given that, there are tons of legal issues that can occur where we provide access to assistance, especially in a crisis like the one that we're all facing right now. All small businesses, whether you're an employee or an employer, are having different issues that need to be taken care of. So normally, Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, our bread and butter, intellectual property, contracts, setting up business entities, things like that, they're all still relevant. However, there are some special issues that are affecting our constituents today. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about that. I also wanted to tell people a little bit about the particular services that we have and the way that we're expanding them and adapting them to the current crisis so that everyone can have access to the work that we're doing. We are a legal services organization that provides both in-house and pro bono referral work. So we have a network of over 100 volunteer attorneys who are interested in doing pro bono work with creatives. So we provide access to legal referrals for creatives. Given the current crisis, we are also providing access to on-the-go consultations. Generally, we have what we call art law clinics, where once a month, folks can sign up for a 30-minute appointment with an attorney at an art venue that rotates. However, now that everything's virtual, we have moved those clinics online. Generally, our legal referrals and other consultations can also be done remotely, and the application fees that we have for legal referrals are being waived for folks who are experiencing financial hardship given the crisis. So one of the first things that I just wanted to provide access to is if you are experiencing anything that we're about to talk about here in terms of potential legal issues, I just submitted a link to the group chat that if you are an artist or work with an arts organization or a group of artists, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, please submit an application there and somebody on our staff will get in touch with you regarding what legal services may be available, whether that's a referral, a consultation, or a clinic. I'm also providing a link in the group chat. We are having a remote clinic coming up this Saturday, where again, you can receive a 30-minute consultation. So I just submitted in the group chat a link where you can sign up for one of those. If you're not able to attend during those time slots, again, we, our volunteer attorneys and folks in our office are making time to have those types of consultations really any day of the week at this point. So that link has been submitted to the group chat as well. Our contact information is also going to be at the end of this slide presentation, so feel free to get in touch. So moving on to some of the actual legal issues for which you might need to get in touch with us. As I mentioned, everybody here is part of a small business, for-profit, nonprofit, self-employed, single person, multiple person. And so there are different legal issues that are coming up in this regard, right? The first, if you are an employer, there are recent acts that have been passed that provide new opportunities for your employees and new obligations that you will need to, that you're obliged to follow. So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act provides access to new areas of sick leave and paid leave that your employees might not have had otherwise if they are affected by a quarantine order by a government entity and aren't able to come to work. There's now paid leave that they might be offered if they're caring for a child whose school has been indefinitely closed, new paid sick leave for that opportunity. If you're suffering from potential symptoms of COVID-19 or even diagnosed with COVID-19 or have to be quarantined for COVID-19, new and enhanced paid sick leave. Now, generally, this is for employers who have less than 500 employees. And there are special exemptions potentially for employers who have less than 50 employees, but it can still apply if employers who have less than 50 employees choose to participate. So if you're an employee, knowing what your rights are under the Family First Coronavirus Act is important and something that you should look into, whether you're part-time or full-time. And if you're an employer, knowing what your obligations are under that act is important. For those of you, I know we're going to be talking a lot about what different resources are available. The CARES Act does provide different types of opportunities, one of which is enhanced benefits in terms of unemployment insurance. I am going to be copying, pasting right now into the group chat a FAQ from the Maryland Department of Labor Division of Unemployment Insurance. As most of you who know, there are now under the CARES Act access to unemployment insurance for folks such as self-employed gig economy workers where none was available beforehand. However, this process has been stymied at multiple levels in terms of it being put into effect. So it's still not able to be applied for if you do fall into that new category, but staying abreast of what the Department of Labor at the state level has to say, and especially following the guidelines set out in the FAQs that I just sent over to see how best to get information about how to apply, how you might be eligible, what benefits might be there, is another thing that I highly recommend because having access to those benefits is only good if you're able to obtain them. As we've seen with most other benefits, having all your paperwork in order, filing quickly and in timely is going to give you the best shot of having access to those. So whether you're dealing with employment or unemployment, those are some things. If there are legal issues that you have come up with those, please get in touch. Also, all businesses, moving on to our next issue, have likely had contracts that are going to be impacted, right? So if you are an artist and you had a contract to perform at an upcoming gig, or you had contracted with other artists to help you, work on a particular piece of art, or you were a teaching artist and you had a contract to continue making work in the schools, all of these contracts likely have provisions that may speak to what happens when we have some type of crisis. Those are sometimes called force majeure provisions that you'll have in a contract, where a contract can be terminated if certain acts of God or otherwise apply. Not all contracts have these types of provisions, or they might have other termination provisions that apply. But it's really important to work with a legal professional to see how your contracts might be affected, what rights, responsibilities, or obligations you might still have, even though we're in crazy time right now. Because it's really important that even though things are extremely difficult and have been very much disrupted, unfortunately, as we've seen with all the areas that we're discussing right now, there are still policies and procedures, including those with your contracts, where I don't want any artist to get in even more trouble, given that it might not sound fair, or again, they might realize, unfortunately, at this point, that their contract wasn't as protective of themselves or gave as many termination options as they might liked. But we just don't want to have, a flurry of breach of contract issues that come out when we finally kind of get back on our feet here. So if you have contracts that have been affected, whether you want to get out of a contract, or you're trying to figure out whether you have to stay in a contract, or you want somebody else to continue to stay into a contract, it's good to review that contract and also speak with a legal professional about it. That's a great thing for some of the consultations we have. Lastly, but also somewhat related to contracts, are commercial property issues. As Delegate Lerman said, as of this past Friday, the Friday before last, Governor Hogan did enact an executive order that did include commercial properties, industrial properties, along with residential properties, in terms of putting a moratorium on evictions for those spaces. Even though that is now in effect, there are still a lack of protections for artists and small business owners who are connected to commercial properties that they need to be aware of. And many of those are lease specific. So the actions that your property holder or property manager could still take against you as a commercial property lessee are going to be more extreme. Even if it is not a sheriff evicting you, there could be potential liens put on your personal property in your space. Locks potentially could be changed. Properties could be relet. And so those are things that it's unclear exactly how you might be affected unless you take a look at your commercial lease again. And again, a lot of the protections that apply to residential leaseholders don't necessarily apply to commercial property leaseholders. So I really want people to take a notice of that. There are different approaches that people are taking, talking to their landlords if rent's becoming an issue. Again, when people are actually going to get money from the PPP program, which also will allow for some of those funds to be spent for rent, is unclear, and it can take some time. There are different approaches being taken around the city and state, so we're happy to talk to folks if they have questions about what their options might be. So please get in touch with us about that. And I think that sort of takes up our time and as well as some of the issues that you're facing. So please get in touch if you have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks so much for joining us today. A lot of the questions that were asked and that were sent in were covered by Adam in terms of unemployment and stuff. So I really appreciate your thorough presentation. And now we're going to hear from Maggie Villegas, who is the Executive Director of the Baltimore Creatives Acceleration Network, and BCAN facilitates fellowships and technical assistance and support for creatives who are ready to scale their passion into a thriving business. So Maggie, I'm really excited to hear from you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Maggie, as Delegate Learman introduced me, and the Baltimore Creatives Acceleration Network is a 10-year citywide initiative that was launched by the Maryland Institute College of Art to strengthen the city's creative ecosystem and economy through the lens of creative entrepreneurship and accelerating the rate at which and capacity for local creatives to think and work entrepreneurially as businesses. And the way that we operate is we actually provide holistic support. So we have several different partners across the city that we work with to tailor technical assistance to creatives in the city. And including the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts has been one of our major partners in terms of providing legal support for our city's creatives. So in response to the COVID crisis, this approach of collective action, this holistic nature by which we work, has really informed the way that we have responded to the COVID crisis. We, have really done a lot of active listening. There's been a lot of work happening around artists supporting artists in terms of our immediate rapid response infrastructure in Baltimore. It's very informal, however, it was very effective. We had several different independent artists start to lead their own funds, and so we started to connect those folks with resources independently. We also have put out a call out to several of our existing partners, as well as partners who are colleagues in the field, even if they aren't formally engaged in our programming as it usually stands, to start to develop longer term supports and as well as immediate short-term responses to the crisis. And this is actually one of the outcomes of this has been the fund that is now housed at the Baltimore Office of Promotion in the Arts, which Donna and her team, Jackie, really stepped up to provide that incredible support, and we're actively fundraising for that as well. So we had that outcome, as well as a collective of different small business resource support organizations, including Impact Hub Baltimore, OpenWorks, the Innovation Works program, as well as Made in Baltimore, to start to do direct outreach and case management with independent small businesses that really fall in that more of that micro enterprise category and outside of the usual support structures for the Small Business Association, who might not qualify for those particular programs. There's also been several collective Makers Unite initiatives that have been campaigning out to not only support the local creative community by providing job opportunities through the production of PPE, but actually to support our healthcare workers. So really what we've seen is this trend of coming together to pool our resources and to start to think more intentionally and strategically as a community to really develop solutions for our constituents. And that's something that we are really passionate about at BCAN and excited to, although we're not excited about the reasoning behind it and what brought us to this point, we are excited to see so much collective action happening in Baltimore. So I'd like to talk a little bit about two of the initiatives that were spawned from that, because there are some local impacts that we've been able to start to see trends formulate. So through the local small business and creative enterprise case management and surveys that we've been conducting, we've seen the impact on employees. Of the people who participated in the survey, they've lost about 50% of their workforce as a result of this crisis. And they're looking at, and these are only approximately 40 respondents, a mix of small businesses and sole proprietors, as well as nonprofits, who are 2.2 million in projected revenue loss based on this crisis. So some of the trends in terms of what they're really looking for.
I don't know if any of it went into her mouth.
I think somebody's mic might actually be on.
I'm on a webcast. I need to plug in.
I think we lost Delegate Learman again. So
Yeah, when Brooke,
interesting. I was thinking of you.
when Brooke gets booted off, everyone becomes unmuted. So please mute your microphone if you're not muted.
Run by one of the Maryland state delegates about the impact of coronavirus
Sally,
on the
please
arts.
mute.
Okay. So some of the trends that we're seeing in terms of needs include a need for improvements in their supply chain because their supply chains are being disrupted, a huge pivot in modification of services, as we've all seen, as well as the reduction in workforce. And as far as the Artist Fund trend, so we in the Artist Fund, which was launched about less than a week ago, it was launched on Wednesday of last week. In that time, we've had over 300 applicants, 321 applicants in a short period as of this morning. And the income loss reported by just those applicants within Baltimore City is over $650,000 on individuals in this short period of time. In terms of the themes that they're really picking up, additional supports that they need beyond grant funding and emergency relief funding, which across the board everybody is reporting is the #1 thing they're looking for, is need for unemployment navigation. They're really desperate to find out when the gig economy workers will be eligible to apply for unemployment. And Adam did cover this during his section, but you can go onto that same link that he shared. The Department of Labor, DLLR, actually has an email sign-up link, so you can get updates if you will qualify for unemployment as a gig worker. That's the best way to find out rather than call or get denied by applying at this time. They really need help navigating their state and federal resources, as well as something that we're really passionate about at BCAN is assistance with financial planning, not just in emergency and crisis mode, but to really get into the practice of financial planning and financial management and really considering yourself as a business ahead of time so that when crisis does strike, you understand the impacts of what's going on and are able to take advantage of these rapid resources as they come up. And the next big thing that people are concerned about is just their self-care, their well-being, both mental and physical health. So one of the reasons that we're really focusing on this data and impact is because our goal as an organization, but also as a creative community that's come together to provide these supports is how do we use this information to not just, again, provide emergency relief, but also to start to think about what are some of the longer term structural supports that we need to put into place as a creative ecosystem here in Baltimore so that when crisis does strike, we're prepared we're able to actually avoid some of these devastating impacts. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the supports that are available now. One, I will just kind of underline the earlier points, which is that you are a business as a creative, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're an independent contractor, whether you are artist that's selling paintings. If there's a transaction involved, you are a business, and you need to consider yourself as a business as you're looking through these opportunities. Delegate Learman's put together a fantastic business resource page on her website, so I highly encourage you to check it out. It has lots of great resources, tips for small business owners. There's also the Baltimore Development Corporation has organized a baltimoretogether.com website where they are aggregating city, state, and federal resources, as well as some curated independent resources from national organizations that are providing relief to small businesses. And again, a lot of these relief programs that are traditionally siloed to not include non-traditional businesses are actually expanding their benefits. Now, they don't necessarily always have the infrastructure to do so, as we're experiencing with the unemployment situation, but they are in process. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out on. The state of Maryland has also launched their Business Express website and have created a relief wizard. So you can actually input your information and it'll start to direct you to the resources that match your current situation, which is extremely helpful. And the other thing that I will add is also that because these resources are coming online really quickly, there are a lot of predatory practices that are starting to crop up as a result, and as we witnessed with the PPP program that was discussed earlier. So just make sure that you're not just jumping into opportunities without making sure you're asking questions. Don't allow a bank to sell you on products that are not needed if you're going to pursue these opportunities. The Maryland Citizens for the Arts, as Nick mentioned, also has some great resource lists, as well as the Baltimore Office of Promotion of the Arts, which Donna will cover as well. As far as artist grants, if you're an independent artist, there are a couple of great grants that are open right now. Of course, the Baltimore Artist Relief Program. There is a national initiative that is called Artist Relief. If you go to artistrelief.org, they're offering grants up to $5,000 to independent artists and also aggregating resources for independent artists. If you identify as Latina or Latino, Latinx, the NALAC organization, which is a national organization, has also launched their Actos de Confianza micro grants program. And locally, if you work within the Bromo Arts District, the Bromo Arts and Entertainment District has also launched an artist relief program. So again,
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So there's a lot of resources. I'll wrap up, but what I will say is that you can always reach out to us for one-on-one consultations, and we'll provide curated resources and support to you at hello@baltimorecreates.org.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. In the time that you were speaking, a hailstorm blew through my house, and there is now my like 5 foot by 5 foot patio has hail all over it. So, what more do we need? Really excited to have Donna Sawyer on the phone or on the Zoom call with us today too. Donna, thank you for making the time. I know you're swamped, but happy and delighted to have you talk a little bit about the Artist Emergency Relief Fund and what you see coming. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brooke. As Maggie alluded to, we have launched this Baltimore Artist Emergency Relief Fund as of last week, the middle of the week. And to mention the fact that we have over 300, almost 400 applications. And by the time I get off the phone, I'm sure there'll be several more. But that fund was launched with, in collaboration with a group of artists and artist support individuals and organizations that came together and talked about their needs, the needs of the community. And within a week, we had pulled this together. And I'm appreciative of all of the groups that and individuals that supported this effort. BOPA may have put the first $20,000 in, but right after, T. Rowe Price came in, BCAN came in, the Grit Fund, so many others that just jumped in to the point where we're at almost $100,000 of 125 goal. So it is always wonderful when things are done in a collaborative fashion. And that is what I think we demonstrated with this fund. We will, BOPA had the $20,000 thanks to MSAC's, release of us. We had it programmed for something else and we said, no, can we use the money for this? And Ken and his group said, absolutely. We had the infrastructure to make the emergency relief fund happen. We do the grants for the city to arts groups. So we had the process in place for submission as well as distribution. My CFO will probably never speak to me again because now this is several hundred checks he has to get out electronically as well as paper. But he's in it. We pulled other people in from other departments. Our communications team jumped in full force and created this beautiful identity for the fund. So this was truly a collaborative initiative, and I am so appreciative to everybody who supported it, and we are so excited about the help we're bringing to the artists here in Baltimore. The Baltimore Office of Promotion in the Arts is really an advocacy organization. We do programming, but our overall goal is to make sure that the arts are recognized for what they do, who they are, how they impact the city, what community represents for the city. And it's not just, I had somebody in City Hall once tell me just last week, yeah, well, the arts are nice. And I just, it was all I could do to just control myself and say, no, they're not nice, they're necessary. And the reason they're necessary is because the loss of our community, which we're all feeling now because we're all sequestered someplace, is probably the biggest blow we'll receive because of the COVID-19, because we're not able to gather. We can't be community. So it is my job as the person that sits on the mayor's cabinet to remind people that the arts are necessary. They're a necessary thing for community to be healthy, whole, progressive, thriving. All of those things happen through the arts. And my goal is to make sure that every councilman knows that, I don't have to tell Delegate Learman, she knows that, but everybody in the state government, it is an opportunity for us to gather in the most creative way, and that's what the arts do for us. So that's really the scope, and the scope of the arts that are impacted is also important because we not only, when people think of artists, they think of visual arts, but there's the performing arts. And I asked Jackie Downs, who's our Arts Council director, to give me some numbers about who was applying. And she said the majority of the artists that are applying are performing artists. So they're for this creative, for the fund. That's followed by musicians, then followed by visual artists. So when you think of the arts, it's not just this monolithic people that paint. It is across the board. It's people that work in the film industry. Netflix just put out a huge, I think it's $10 million to people that work in the television industry. We have tons of those. We do a lot of Netflix. We do a lot of Amazon Prime programming is filmed here in the city of Baltimore. So all of those people are also out of work. And to build that industry supports the city of Baltimore as well. So there is a broad spectrum, as Adam said, everything from jugglers to pastry chefs are all part of the creative community. And the maker community is probably one of our most important because they are the entrepreneurs, and over 53% of people in America work in small businesses. So those are our small businesses. So I just want to make sure that we all understand how important it is to talk us up, talk up the creative industry to anybody you talk to that has the power to make that change. And we are currently in budget season in the city of Baltimore. And if the budget stands as it is now, and they are reworking it, but I'm not sure it'll be in the advantage for the cultural community. We get approximately, let me see if I can find the number, like 19% of what the tourism industry gets in the city of Baltimore. So more money is put into bringing people from out of town here than keeping people in town here. And we really need to have more equity in that respect so that Baltimore takes care of its own as well as it takes care of people that they want to come visit. So that's an important thing. So as they start to publish the budget, I can certainly keep everybody posted on how we stand. Right now it's not so good, but we can fix it. We have until May 6th to get our, before the final preliminary budget is published. And then it takes the support of our city council to, they cannot add to the budget, but they can take things away. So if we can get a little bit more money put into our side of the equation versus the tourism side, that would be helpful for all of us.
Thank you.
The last thing I wanted to say is that over the years, I don't think BOPA has been as active in the arts realm as we are right now. I'm relatively new in the CEO job, and Jackie Downs, our Arts Council Director, is also relatively new. But I think from the work we're doing now, we have learned how to marry what we were known for in the past, which is our festivals, with the arts influence that the festivals have as well as the Arts Council has. We also manage the Public Art Commission to make sure that not only that the treasures that live here in our public art are taken care of. That also falls on getting money from the city through the 1% for Art ordinance. So all of those things, we need the public, the artists, the institutions to advocate for to the city on our own behalf. It's not on behalf of BOPA, it's on behalf of the city of Baltimore and the artists in Baltimore and the creative community in Baltimore. And I think, you know, one of the things Ken mentioned that I think is very important and that we're thinking about is what does the other side of this look like? What does the other side of this COVID-19 crisis look like? I do not believe it's going to look like it did in the past. I think what we have to do is figure out what the future looks like. Is it kind of a WPA initiative where we can put artists to work doing things that we needed done anyway? Is it, I got a call from the aquarium today saying, you know, we usually do the Henry Hall camp and it takes kids out of town. If we wanted to keep kids in town, can BOPA help us with that? The answer, absolutely yes. So those are the kind of things that we're working on that is more of a collaborative effort, more of a Baltimore-based effort, which, you know, we provide over 60% of the income in the arts sector comes from stuff that's done here in Baltimore. So it reverberates out into the state, and with the support of the Maryland State Arts Council, with the support of our legislators, we can make a huge difference. And maybe this should be the emphasis for the future, that maybe we make Baltimore one of those hubs, those creative hubs that brings people here instead of us losing population.
Yeah,
So,
no, I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yep. Well, thank you. Thank you, all of you, so much. We have time for a few questions, and we had so many questions, but I think actually many of your presentations covered answers to some of the questions that we have. So the first few questions were really about unemployment and how unemployment compensation for self-employed people is being calculated, how long it takes before self-employed people receive funds after they have applied. Really briefly, I'll take some of those really briefly. The Federal CARES Act did make several modifications to the unemployment program, like Adam mentioned. And the unemployment compensation for self-employed people is calculated based on sort of your recent wages. In terms of how long it takes before self-employed people receive funds after they've applied. So first, of course, the system has to be opened up. And we know the Department of Labor is experiencing, an incredible amount of volume of calls. And they're working to change their whole mainframe to take new categories of applicants. They did not used to be able to take some of the applicants that the federal government is now allowing them to take. They're adding Saturdays to the days when their calls will be taken, and they're working to double their claims processing staff. But we have had a number of people reach out to us to say there's lots of busy lines, and I understand, and I think they understand and they're working on it. Maryland doesn't have a waiting week, unlike many other states, and so you're eligible to file the day after you're separated from employment, and but of course, due to the expected claim loan, the Division of Unemployment Insurance won't provide a definitive timeline on benefit delivery. However, even if you can't apply right away, or even if it takes a little bit of time to get it, you will be paid for all of the time period that you were separated from. So the department said last week that they have paid out tens of millions of dollars in unemployment. That extra $600 that is going out should be starting in the next week or so. I think they said April 24th, the last time I checked. So that extra money will be going out soon as well. The first payment will be on a debit card and will cover all benefits that are owed, sort of accrued to that date. And after that, it will be on a weekly basis. So we had a number of other questions, and I've shared those with some of the panelists. I don't know if any of the panelists are specific ones that they'd like to cover, but we had questions about, how arts organizations can be supporting artists. Is there a way the emergency fund grant applications can be streamlined? What classes or resources can be offered to help creatives build their platforms virtually online? And there's also a discussion and several questions about how to make sure that, I like this, how can we pivot to make the arts and humanities seem as valuable to the economy as the airlines and cruise ship companies? And I like Donna's line of saying, this isn't nice, it's necessary. And so I think making sure that you all are working together and that you're communicating with me and people like me throughout government is so important. Done on the economic impact and the jobs that are created through the arts industry are incredibly important, and I think very persuasive. Just as by way of example, my son participates in something called Future Makers, which is an after-school care program, and I was contacted about all of the people that they're going to have to lay off, and even me, who's pretty involved in this, hadn't sort of realized, oh, of course, this after-school program, which is an arts-based industry, is no longer able to serve kids because there's no after-school programs, and so they're going to have to lay everybody off. So I think thinking about really taking time to think through how the ramifications of this, and when you draw it out and painting that picture for people is so important and so helpful. Just don't take for granted that we understand sort of the magnitude of ramifications from the schools being closed or theaters being closed and what all of that looks like. So I'm going to turn it over to some of our panelists if there are any questions specifically that they'd like to take on. I'll turn it over to you guys. And we'll just do a few minutes and then we'll wrap up. Maggie or Nicholas or anybody, any specific questions that you think you'd like to take on?
Sure. So in terms of how you could be supporting artists right now, I think that's really important as we are all a small community. I think checking in on artists is really important right now, or checking in on each other's organizations. Just say, hey, how are you doing? You're not alone. That has been one of the most impactful pieces of our case management that we've been doing. You can still contribute to the Artist Relief Fund through BOPA's website. So if you go to the Baltimore Artist Relief Fund website, you can, on the promotioninarts.org website, you can donate directly as an individual to that fund, and 100% of that money is going directly to the artists. BOPA has really stepped up in an incredible way to provide the pro bono staffing needed to administer the volume of applications that we are getting and anticipate continuing to get. Just share resources and opportunities. So just be a connector as much as possible. Where you can, pay people out on contracts. They're probably not going to be getting work until they're able to get back on into in-person connections. So just wherever your budgets allow it, if those grants are already there, make good on those contracts. It'll go a long way for future relationships as well. And also just wherever you can, offering any kind of pro bono services that you may have as a personal subject matter expert. Maybe you're an expert at finances, maybe you're a great marketing person. A lot of these small businesses or independent artists are trying to figure out how to promote themselves now that they have completely new business models and types of programming in a virtual landscape full of a lot of noise. So just wherever you can, if you have the bandwidth to offer that kind of advising, please do so. And also just buy their work, promote their work. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. There's a lot of incredible local artists in Baltimore. And as I know I've certainly been sitting around my house thinking about like, oh man, I really can't wait to buy a couple pieces because definitely I'm working from home more. So I want more art to fill my room with. So anyway, just supporting each other's work, shopping locally, that it really goes a long way.
I'd just like to say something. When we could always use testimonials to support what it is that we do. So if when Brooke said that Future Makers impacts her life with the arts, how is it impacting yours? Send those letters to the editors, share it on websites, share it in your social media. Anything that says the arts are important to me is important to say, because it's not said enough and we don't get enough kudos for the work that we do here in the city. So if you can give us a testimonial, we'll take it. Oh, one more thing. Please fill out your census, because we need your
census. Yes.
That determines how much federal support we get from Washington. So please, 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 please fill out your census.
Yes. So important and so easy. Census.gov. Please, please fill out your census.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to add, well, first, Maggie and Donna, thank you so much. Those were amazing points that I think everybody should really take to heart. I think one of the things Donna mentioned earlier, which I wanted to harp on, is we are, we're not at the bottom of this thing yet, and everybody does need to make sure that they get through it and survive. It's much more survivability than sustainability right now. But if you have the bandwidth to start doing your visioning work, I think we have a huge opportunity to come out of this with ideas that will lead us to a new reality. Most of us in the creative community have always been used to, doing more with less, and this is where it gets us. And a lot of the reason is this is really about the infrastructure or lack thereof in terms of the preservation of labor in general. And most people have never, given creative labor its value or its due, but generally, most types of very important labor aren't given their value or due. So the more that people can start to really be thinking about are the issues that we're facing now, issues of a lack of labor, labor rights, labor protections, lack of solidarity, lack of collective action, direct action. Those are all things that I think we're going to come out of this hopefully prioritizing in the creative sector. So that's, I think, as we're talking about how do we do more as a creative community, it's how do we partner with other areas of labor that are just as underfunded and undersupported as we are right now. So I'd be thinking about those partners as well.
Yep. Thank you for that. Nicholas, any final words?
Well, I mean, for me, I'll just add, I think what Adam just said is a perfect piece of, I think I think of when we think of who our funders are in the arts community, both private and from the public sector, from the government. When we come out of this, we've shown our worth, our collective worth as businesses. We create jobs, we improve the quality of life by having the arts in every community in Maryland. And I know when you come out of an economic and health crises, there are going to be difficult conversations. And I know that some of the questions you referred to, Brooke, that they were around what is the arts budget from the state going to look like next year. And our position is we thank the legislative body approved again record funding for the State Arts Council, and we're hoping that we can keep that, because again that goes towards the investment in the continuation of what we're doing, what we're providing citizens and residents and all Marylanders, and getting them better and moving them forward. So I also think that the same conversations have to be had in the private sector with private funders, so that they know, that we need more. We need more investment. We can't just rely on the state of Maryland. It has to be together. So, and Maryland Citizens is committed to doing that and to champion that movement. So thanks again for having this conversation, Brooke.
Thank you. And thank you all of us so much for joining us. I just want to end with a note of gratitude. Thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing in our communities around the state. Thank you to our panelists for taking the time to join us today. Also, I'm always thinking of our other frontline workers, whether they're transit drivers or grocery store workers or our healthcare workers who are really working hard for all of us today and throughout this. So I feel certainly a deep sense of gratitude for the work that all they're doing and all the work that you are doing. This presentation will be on YouTube. I will be uploading it this evening if there are no technical glitches. And then I will post it on my website tomorrow, brookelearman.org and or .com. And we will have also send out an email with a link to it, as well as all the links that were mentioned today as well. So thank you, all of you, so much for joining us. I look forward to keeping in touch throughout all of this and ensuring that this generation and the next generation of children and adults in Maryland can take advantage of an incredible art scene in Baltimore and around the state of Maryland. So thank you.